when Donald Trump during his campaign, he called Mexicans rapists and drug dealers. What have you seen as the ripple effects of that today on just what I would say what happened and is continuing to happen in our culture, maybe because of that phrasing and that type of painting of a picture, but then also on the immigration policies that Trump was putting into place during his 4 years. I'd love to kind of talk a little bit about some of these modern day ways that our faith has to intersect with the way we view our politics and things like that. So let me turn that over to you, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So Donald Trump, of course, did not invent anything new when he said that. He tapped into to racialized, sinful ways of thinking that have gotten politicians elected for the last 150 years, right? So he didn't invent it, right? It's just it's a tried and true formula. Tap into racism, and you get elected, right? There was once a pastor, to give a historical example, a pastor in 1879. His name was Kulloch, and he was in San Francisco, and he preached one on the 4th of July. That he prayed this sermon. He said, "God, thank you for creating us, this wonderful nation ordained by you," and so on and so forth. And God, may you help capital respect the rights of labor, and help good men to stay and bad men to go, and the Chinese must go. That was his prayer, on a 4th of July church picnic or something, right? So it's nothing new, right? Those attitudes, right? And there's one scholar by the name of Leo Chavez who wrote a book called The Latino Threat. And he said that, basically for 150, 200 years, there's been this picture of Latinos in the U.S. as this unassimilable, inferior cultural race who wants to take over back the land that was taken away from Mexico, and they're criminals, and they're this, and they're that, right? So Donald Trump was just parroting that, right? And so, again, that gets people elected. It still works. It gets them elected today. It'll get people elected 50 years from now, because that's ethnic nationalism. It's part of sinful human nature, right? It happens in China. It happened in Mexico when Mexico banned the Chinese. It's like racial pornography, right? It stimulates people and it gets people elected. Now, that being said, the effects of it, right, are that, well, I mean, the most horrible thing, kids in cages, right? Kids in cages. Yeah. Remember that. The effects of that in policy recently were that, in the Trump administration, the actual legal structures of immigration enforcement were changed under Donald Trump. So prior to Donald Trump, in the Obama era, and Obama was no friend to immigrants, let me be as clear as possible, but at least the Obama administration created an imperfect order of immigration enforcement. And they said, at least in theory, we're going to leave families alone. At least in theory, people don't have criminal records, we're going to leave them alone. And it was imperfect because, again, just because someone has one criminal mistake, right, it's like, there's redemption and forgiveness. So that's why I'm saying it's imperfect. But there was some kind of prioritization that was not imperfect, but at least it was there. Donald Trump took that away and said all of a sudden, basically the way that he recategorized things, any person that is in the U.S. without documentation is a priority for arrest. That's what happened, right? And that sent terror through our communities. I remember one student telling me, after lecture one day at UCLA, "Professor Romero, can I get the slides for the last week?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure. What happened?" She said, "Well, my mom, she has papers, right? In other words, she was, had legalized status, but she got swept up in an immigration raid at her work, and we've been looking for her for a whole week. We don't know where she is." Those are the stories, or the story of Pastor Noé Carillas, that I and my colleagues from the Matthew 25 movement had the privilege of working on this national case where Pastor Noé Carillas, he left. He fled Guatemala as a young kid because he had been basically like kidnapped by guerrillas and forced to work with the guerrillas for about 5 years. He leaves at the age of 13, tries to find his family. His family is gone. He comes to the U.S., becomes an Assemblies of God pastor. He owns his own business, marries a U.S. citizen wife, has 2 U.S. citizen kids, but he was going to be deported. He was going to be deported, right? He told us, he said, man, I've been giving I haven't been deported because people tend to, the government has tended to recognize my situation. But now under the Trump administration, I have a bad feeling about this. And sure enough, they tried to deport him. And that led hundreds of churches throughout the United States and from here down to the tip of Chile, praying and advocating for Pastor Noé. And we did like prayer vigils and services in front of the ICE headquarters. And we sent notes to the ICE director with Bible verses and Roman Catholic social teachings because we know he was a strong Roman Catholic. And there's prayer and fasting. I remember going to like East LA on a Friday night with pastors from all the district, just praying and, seeking God. And Pastor Noé, he was like, they were not going to budge on his case. Right? But his case showed how messed up things were, the real life effects. But God did a miracle. Right? And when we thought all hope was lost, it was the day of his daughter's birthday, and his daughter was went to Disneyland with a friend. We get a call, and they say, Pastor Noah is going to be released. I'll never forget. I got in the car with my son and daughter and wife and a few of us from Matthew 25. We drove, and I have the video still of Pastor Noé being released, and it's the most beautiful and being reunited with his family through tears. And it just brought to life so much, Jesus' words that he's, to paraphrase, he's come to set the captives free. Right? Multiply that by millions of instances of thousands of people and millions of people, and that's just the beginning of the pain that was inflicted by the sin of racism. We can discuss differences in policy, that's fine, but we cannot discuss. There's no biblical debate about God's heart for immigrants and the poor. 2,000 verses talk to us about it. There's no debate about that principle. We can have a good, healthy discussion and debate and even fight. That's fine about the policy. But what the Trump administration instituted, and by the way, I'm a political independent. I'm not a Republican or a Democrat by choice. What the administration did was it brought us back to this dark ages of manifest destiny, right? Where we can't even have a debate, a healthy discussion, and where most Christians don't even realize that there are 2,000 verses in Scripture that talk about God's heart for the poor and immigrants. That's where we're at. And it's devastating.